You're going to start to see sometimes some of these voice mistakes. One of the big ones is the inflection of our voice. So it would sound like this. The program is 3 months long and the cost is $3,000. This is basically asking the person to object because you don't even sound sure of yourself. You'd actually practice going down in pitch. Instead of it's $3,000, you sound unsure, $3,000. You sound sure. Using the phrase, it sounds like. You could say, okay, it sounds like you want me to accept less than the program is worth. And when you say it like that, they reflect and they think, well, so it sounds like, then whatever your understanding is, and then they're going to confirm or correct you, and you win either way. Even though communication plays a role in all of those things, people aren't usually thinking about this stuff nearly as much as they should be.
All right, y'all. Thanks so much for being here listening to another episode of UPBEAT. We've got a very special guest today. His name is Ty Hoesgen, and he is a communication expert. Ty, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Parker. Pleasure to be here.
We're excited to have you. I know I am too. We're going to learn a lot from you. But before we jump into some of the tactics, which you've got some really good ones. I've listened to some previous episodes of podcasts you've been on, and so I'm excited to go there. But before we do, I like to learn a bit more about you and your story and maybe what led you to pursuing this topic of communication. So if you don't mind taking 2 or 3 minutes to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yes, absolutely. So when I was a kid, my favorite thing to do was actually to climb trees. That was my favorite activity. This is my favorite activity because the top of the tree seemed like the least likely place to run into another person. And so I was very much a shy, quiet, awkward, introverted type of kid, and I loved being alone. I grew up on a very small farm surrounded by trees, which was very convenient. And the closest town actually had 800 people, only 800 people in the whole town. And at that time, Parker, that was 800 more people than I wanted to interact with. I just loved avoiding people. I liked being by myself. And I would go to great lengths to avoid human interaction. So for you, Parker, do you have any siblings?
I have one sibling. Yeah, I have a younger sister.
You have a younger sister. So you're the older brother. In my case, I was the younger brother, and I had an older sister. So my older sister was the exact opposite of me. She was very much the bubbly, outgoing, extrovert type of person. So when we were kids, somebody would ask me a question. My sister would jump in and answer questions for me. That's what Ty thinks. I'll tell you what Ty thinks. Here's Ty's answer. So little Ty actually really liked this because he got to just chill in the background, don't have to worry about too much. She just took over. Now, you can kind of get through life like that when you're a kid, when you're younger, but if you're getting a little bit older, having your older sister answering questions for you doesn't really work. Especially when you enter the professional world, you have to get a job now. She's not coming on interviews with me. She's not doing the work for me. So I got a very rude wake-up call when I first graduated university. The only job I could get was selling life insurance. Now, it's interesting. At this point in my career, I'm actually worried about asking somebody about their weekend or about their dog. Like, even the most casual small talk terrified me. And now, this life insurance job, this was the only job I could get. And now my income, my livelihood, me being able to make money really depends on my ability to not only have tough conversations, but to have tough conversations with people that are resistant to me because I look about 16 years old. So imagine you're 40 or 50 and there's this little 16-year-old kid telling you, hey, you need to think about what's going to happen in case you die young. Just didn't really work very well. And even for a skilled communicator, I imagine that would have been tough. So I struggled so much at this point. So hearing your story about you got to a point where you're feeling low, you're feeling depressed. You're like, what's the point of life? Why am I here? Do I have to keep going on? I definitely had that point where I was struggling so much, making no money, and I really felt kind of worthless. I remember thinking to myself, why is this so hard for me? Why was I born like this? Why can't I figure this out? And I remember one particular day when all I had to do was give a very, very quick little presentation to my coworkers. It was supposed to help them understand what I did better so they could give me referrals because I really needed them. And I remember very vividly going to the bathroom before this presentation, just puking my guts out. I was so nervous. I only had to talk to about 4 or 5 coworkers. So I stumbled through the presentation, sweating, just messing things up. Nobody's really listening. And I remember laying in bed that night, just thinking that I have to do something differently. There's gotta be a way to change this. I believe a lot of people kind of get this fixed mindset when it comes to certain things like their speaking and their communication. Like, I am an introvert. I am an extrovert. I am good with people. I am not so good with people. I'm confident. I'm reserved. But all these labels, they kind of limit you. So something that I learned and I had to really realize for myself at that time was everything is learnable. Even traits like confidence or being charismatic or speaking clearly. These are all skills that are learnable. So at that point, I just became obsessed with communication, spent every waking hour when I wasn't working, reading, researching, practicing, experimenting, recording myself. And it eventually got to the point where I was starting to notice some progress, not throwing up before meetings anymore. And then everything just kind of skyrocketed from there. I say skyrocketed, but it was actually a long process.
Yeah.
It was a long process because I did it all on my own. I didn't really pursue the help of anyone because coaches weren't as prominent at that time. But that's really how I got to where I am today, now teaching others how to communicate and how to speak, not over the course of many years like it took me to learn, but over the course of a few months. Because when you actually know what you're doing, you can make progress much faster.
Love that. And thanks so much for giving us kind of that context and that look into your background, like you getting to where you are today and pursuing this. Obviously, some personal emotional ties to it too, and how you've been able to improve your life. And it's kind of like, you know, when you experience that, then of course you want other people to experience it too, so you can coach them. Communication, it's a fascinating thing because it's like human psychology, and it's like a really important part of our lives that I feel like we don't put the spotlight on enough. And so do you also kind of feel this sense of like greater calling, like you are the person to put the spotlight on it?
100%. And I don't know if anyone's ever laid awake at night thinking, I really want to improve my speaking skill. Right? Normally they'll lay awake at night thinking, oh, I'm nervous, I'm stressed about this, I need to make more money, I need a better relationship. But even though communication plays a role in all of those things, people aren't usually thinking about this stuff nearly as much as they should be. So it's really funny. A lot of times I'll speak with people, and even clients when they start, people will be surprised and they'll say things like, oh, I didn't even realize this was something I was doing wrong, or I didn't even realize this was something that I could get better at. So I think there's a big misconception around how a lot of these things can be improved, just knowing how to practice, how to do things the right way. Certain people will say, well, no, I speak all the time. You know, I've obviously got enough practice in. I've spoken for 40 years, 30 years, 50 years. But it's not really just about practicing. You have to practice the right way. But people don't often realize there's a very specific way of learning. I'll give you an example here. One of my clients, she just finished up the program, and when she had started, naturally actually outgoing person, confident speaking to her friends, confident speaking to the team members that were beneath her. But when it comes to speaking to those, upper level executives or big clients, people like that, she realized she's kind of rambling a little bit. Her points aren't very clear. She's not as concise as she'd like. And when we started working together, one of the things I'll teach is different frameworks, like ways of organizing your thoughts and ideas. So how to structure what you're saying. And for her, she started practicing using some of these structures, some of these frameworks, which we can talk about later if you'd like. And she realized, I just didn't have a way of clearly organizing what I was going to say. Now that I've practiced this and I know this, it's actually pretty easy for me to be clear in some of these high pressure situations, just because I have a tool. There's a tool for almost everything. It's just knowing what the tool is, and then you can take it out of your tool belt whenever you want to use it.
I absolutely love that. And I'm excited to get into some of the frameworks. So I'm hoping you're game to share some of those things. First kind of question though that comes to mind is, like, in that professional realm of talking, communicating, do you feel like the speaking to higher ups is like one of the most common I guess fears, or where the mistakes happen? Or what are some other I guess really common things that you see?
Most people probably, if you're listening to this, you probably feel pretty comfortable talking to your best friends, talking to your family, talking to people that you know very well. But when we're speaking to people that we find kind of intimidating, or we see they're in a higher role than us, or if you're trying to pursue a prospect in your business and this person is very established, we see them as, this is a big fish that we can try to get. It's usually in those situations that the nerves come up more, we feel less confident, and then therefore we speak worse than we speak to, our friends, family, those types of situations. So I would say that's definitely a big one, is speaking in those more high pressure situations, speaking in the ones that we might deem more important or around more important people. If you, let's say, who's somebody that you look up to, Parker? Like let's say a famous entrepreneur, celebrity,
like top of the line, like who, like an idol kind of thing.
Yeah.
Ryan Tedder from One Republic.
So if you were interviewing Ryan Tedder right now, you'd probably feel differently than you interviewing me.
I would be more nervous. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for playing along with that. That helped reinforce the point.
Yeah.
You said, no, actually, I'd feel the same. And the point would be lost, so I appreciate you.
No, I really do feel like I'd be more nervous.
I would be too, for sure. That's a fantastic band. That's a good example, because it's not that people typically struggle with speaking in general, in all situations, like I did. Most people actually weren't like past Ty, especially the ones I work with. Most people just have those certain situations. And so it's learning how to show up better and be more confident, because you have these now tools that you can use. And that's a lot of times the difference maker in terms of how stressed someone is at work, how confident they feel going to work. With my clients, we try to measure as much as possible, which I'm sure you can tell with communication, it's kind of difficult to measure with numbers, right? If, for example, somebody's a business coach and they say, I'm going to help you make $10,000 more per month, that's easy to measure. But with communication, it's a little harder with numbers, but we try to measure things like confidence, stress at work, speaking skills, stuff like that, from 1 to 10 levels. So I just finished working with the gentleman. He was a executive in a pretty big company, but he was super stressed at work, not very confident at work, even though he seemed like it on the outside. And with him, we ended up decreasing his stress by 60% when it came to speaking at work. And then we increased his confidence by 80% when it comes to speaking at work in some of those higher pressure situations. So just to kind of illustrate the impact of how much of a difference some of this stuff can make, this is a gentleman that he's having trouble sleeping if he has big situations to speak in at work the next day. It's impacting his family because he's stressed. And just learning some of these things, becoming a better speaker, lowering that stress, being more confident. Not only does it help you show up better at work, but all that kind of translates into your everyday life too. So it's another reason I'm so passionate and why this is so meaningful is because just even changing the way that a person feels waking up in the morning and going to work, that to me is probably one of the most valuable things.
Yeah, it affects like the day in, day out, just immediately there's a level up in life if every single day you feel a lot better going to work and stuff. Well, let's kind of dig into it here then. To give you some context, we just had a previous episode with a body language expert, and we talked about confidence. Something that kind of came to light was these creative entrepreneurs, including myself, sometimes really struggle with selling what it is we do, right? We lack that confidence. We're very creative and confident in what we do, but then when it comes to being on a call like what we're on right now, but the difference is I'm asking you for $3,000 for me to do the thing that I'm good at, right? Then all of a sudden the confidence goes down, the stress goes up. And we've covered body language, but I'm curious what you've got for us with like voice and communication and what we can do to kind of level up in that way.
Really good question. That's great. I'm glad that body language was covered previously because then they can use the body language tips from that episode and voice for what we're going to talk about now. So let's say you are a creative entrepreneur. You're trying to sell your service to someone or whatever your business happens to be. I highly recommend recording yourself just saying what you would say to this person as if you're on that call with them. And then listen to it back, and you really want to listen to it back as if you're another person. So listen for things like, do I sound sure of myself? Do I sound confident? Would I believe me? A lot of times we'll actually sound pretty confident when we're talking about what the service is and what we're actually providing. But when it gets to talking about the money or the timeline, stuff that's a little bit more uncomfortable for people, you're going to start to see sometimes some of these voice mistakes coming up. One of the big ones is the inflection of our voice. So inflection with our voice is the change in pitch. So the big thing you're going to want to listen for, what you don't want to do when you're listening to yourself, you don't want to hear going up in pitch at the end of a sentence. So it would sound like this. The program is 3 months long, and the cost is $3,000. So I'm going kind of up in pitch at the end of my sentence. And so it kind of has a question-sounding tone. Now, this is basically asking the person to object because you don't even sound sure of yourself. Okay, so listen for changes in pitch. If you really want to practice this, you'd actually practice going down in pitch. So you'd say, the program is 3 months long and it's $3,000. Instead of it's $3,000, you sound unsure. $3,000. You sound sure.
Yeah, that's a very simple tactic that had a really big difference right there.
Oh, and the amount of people that I've heard on different calls like this, different situations, and they'll crush it the whole call. Everything sounds fantastic, but then you get to some of these most important parts, kind of the uncomfortable stuff that makes people nervous, money being the biggest one. Then they'll do a little upward voice inflection like that, and then it's really hard to come back from because you don't even sound sure. So why would the other person be sure?
Yeah, well, and sometimes I've seen like rambling into another question, which if they're not asking the question, maybe their voice is doing that because internally they're asking the question. Like, the service is $3,000. Is that okay with you? Like, what do you think? It's kind of that follow up of, but maybe even if they're not saying that, it's still coming through in their pitch,
For sure. So practicing that until you can be almost like it's second nature, where you can, okay, I'm going to practice going down in pitch to where that just sounds really comfortable, really natural. Another big mistake you want to look out for is if you're decreasing your volume during some of those important parts. So if I say the program is 3 months long and it's $3,000, It's really making me sound less confident and, again, less sure of myself. You want people to be confident in you, so you have to make sure that your voice is projecting enough confidence that they trust you and they trust what you're saying. So we've got not going up in pitch, ideally going down in pitch, not decreasing our volume, ideally keeping that volume consistent. And then another one, this is going to be probably, those would be the top 3 biggest mistakes. This third one is going too fast, rushing through that part. Anything that's uncomfortable, we usually want to rush through it, right? So not only keeping your speed consistent, but actually slowing down your pace to make the other person feel more comfortable. They don't really like talking about price either. So if you slow down, it shows you're relaxed, shows you're calm, in control. And these are all signals that you want to send to the person that's potentially about to work with you, give you money, and trust you to help them get them a result. So top 3 there to summarize: don't go up in pitch, don't lower your volume, and don't speed up, slow down.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely. That's something we could all work on. And it just comes with being more aware of what we're doing. And also, like you said, taking that extra step of recording practice, practice versions to see what it is we're doing. And when we listen back, almost put ourselves in that buyer's role of like, would I trust this person if they were talking to me like this? I think with that too, the pitch one specifically, I've seen a lot of content creation. So a lot of listeners too, they go live like what we're doing right now on TikTok. They present, they're making YouTube videos, and they do that upward pitch a lot as like part of a presenting. Like, hey guys, hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to work on this. And they do that thing on that upward pitch on like every sentence, every single one, in like a presenting kind of way. So what are maybe some thoughts on when you're presenting, how to seem confident but still like energetic and entertaining?
Good question, because there's certainly a difference if you're on that sales call with a person, discovery call, whatever you're on. It's a lot different than giving a presentation to maybe a group, right, where you need to have some higher energy. You don't want to be super high energy talking about your price. It comes across, maybe a little overly excited. You want to be really calm and composed in those types of situations. Then if you're presenting, it's definitely advantageous to have a little bit more energy, be a little bit more engaging, show up, smile. You can speak a little louder. Variety with your voice helps with that too. And so you can think about, how can I tailor this according to the situation and who's watching? Okay. So thinking about, the type of audience that you have, the type of people that will be watching or listening, what's your goal? So are you trying to inspire? Are you trying to persuade? Are you just trying to share some value, give some knowledge? That's super important. But if you're presenting, something that you can do with your voice, we'll stay on that topic, is change either the volume, the speed, or you can emphasize certain words. So think of how you can make your voice sound a little bit different at times. It's going to help people listen to you for longer periods. So think of it like slowing down during the more important parts and getting a little bit faster. You can speak a little bit louder at other parts. You don't have to overthink, when do I go slow? When do I go fast? When do I get louder? When do I go quieter? Just think of adding some type of variety when you're giving this presentation. There's tons of science behind. I'm sure everyone knows the monotone voice talking like this. There's no variety. I'm just speaking the same the whole time. You would all stop listening immediately. Probably if I hopped on the podcast with Parker and was talking like that, nobody would be listening anymore.
Might have even just lost 2 or 3. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
And so with that, your voice does make a big difference. It can really change the level of engagement. Now, you don't have to be all over the place, wacky, up, down, flying around. but just making sure that you're not monotone and just switching it up a little bit. That's going to really help with your presenting. And so just know the difference. Am I presenting? Am I trying to, get people excited, or am I speaking to just a couple people and I want them to really feel like I'm calm and under control? Just know what your goal is and then tailor your voice and even your energy levels based on that.
Appreciate that big time. And yeah, thanks for being so open with like the value here. I know, probably near the end of the episode, we'll do, a couple questions from TikTok, and then you'll have an offering, I'm assuming, for the listeners, the UPBEAT listeners. And I'm just really excited about the content in this interview. And like, I would highly encourage people to check you out, because I think you'd be absolutely helpful to anyone in any level of their business or even their personal life, which is kind of the pivot I wanted to make here. We live in a world of kind of some regular hard conversations with religion or politics or whatever, disagreements at home. But even in the previous example of selling our services, right? Like negotiations and people wanting to talk us down out of our prices and all of that. What are some things we can do to be more confident and also be less like contentious and encourage like a healthy conversation with the other person?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are probably more difficult conversations to have now than we would like, but that is just kind of the world that we're living in now. I'm going to flip this to the other side of a conversation. The other side being, what's something that we can do when we're not speaking, but we're actually listening to what the other person is saying. So if somebody's trying to get you to accept less money for your service, or somebody's trying to bring something up, ask you a question that makes you uncomfortable, what can you do when you're being spoken to make sure that you're getting the results that you want, that you really understand the person, and really just make those difficult conversations smoother? So we all know we should be good listeners. We should try to understand the person. But how do you actually do that? So one of the techniques that I teach and that people seem to like the most, it's called paraphrasing, which we may have heard of. Paraphrasing is really just stating what we've understood back to the other person. So you would do this using the phrase, "it sounds like." So if Parker is telling me about his story, I could say something like, "Oh, it sounds like that was a difficult time for you." And he'd say, "Yeah, it was a difficult time." And then he'd probably keep going. He'd expand on it. Now, let's say it wasn't a difficult time. I say, "Oh, it sounds like it was a difficult time for you." You'd say, "Well, maybe it wasn't that difficult. Maybe it was more actually like this other thing." So when we paraphrase, when we say, "Okay, it sounds like this," you're either going to get confirmed or you're going to get corrected. So this is a kind of, for me, I find it like a magical little way to make sure that I really understand and that I actually know what the other person is saying. Sometimes for whatever reason, people might explain something and maybe they just didn't explain it well. Maybe they're not very good communicators and they actually meant something else. Or maybe they're holding something back, and so they said something a little bit different than what they actually meant. But we as people just can't not correct others. We love to correct. So if I said, "Oh, it sounds, Parker, like that was actually an easy time in your life," you'd be like, "Actually, Ty, no, it wasn't. It was difficult. Here are the reasons why."
Yeah.
So whether you confirm or you correct, either way, I get to know exactly what you mean. So it's really good in a difficult conversation, because a lot of times it's just that there's a disconnect in terms of the understanding. And if they feel like you don't understand them, if your perception's a little bit off, and conversations can last much longer, you can waste a lot of time going back and forth, or you can end a conversation thinking two completely different things without knowing it. Let's say we're talking about price, for example, in that situation you mentioned. It can also be a good way of making the other person reflect on what they've said. So if they say, "Okay, your price is $3,000, I mean, can we do like 2,000? 3,000 seems a little bit high for that. You could say, okay, it sounds like you want me to accept less than the program is worth. And when you say it like that, they reflect and they think, well, I mean, I don't necessarily want to give you less than it's worth. I guess 3,000 is just a lot for my budget right now. Okay, so then now maybe you can do 2,000 for a lesser program, not 2,000 for the full thing, but maybe they actually only have 2,000 and now you've uncovered that and you can go from there. Either way, you're just trying to make sure you understand and you're getting all the information you need. So it sounds like then whatever your understanding is, and then they're going to confirm or correct you and you win either way.
That was pretty gold, man. Not gonna lie, we'll have to clip that up into some social media posts and stuff and share it out there. But that was gold. That was like a pro tip. It sounds like, and then listen and be attentive for looking for the correction or the confirmation. Like that's kind of a communication hack, I guess.
Absolutely. One of my favorites for sure. It's magic the more that you use it.
Yeah, and it's valuable not only in business and in the scenario that we've been working with here, but also just in your personal life, talking to your parents, your spouses, your kiddos, like whoever it is, it could be very, very beneficial. So that right there is a pro tip to really level up anyone's communication in any aspect of their life, which is valuable, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And you're absolutely nailed it about the personal life too. I mean, we've all got families. A lot of the listeners, they might have kids, they might have partners, spouses. No matter who you use this with, it's really helpful. And a lot of my clients will have children, and they'll say they use it even with their kids that are like 7, 8 years old. And they'll even get more information from their 7 and 8-year-old kids using this. So there's really no limits. I would use this personally, professionally, any type of situation. Definitely makes a big difference. And just keep in mind, you don't have to be right. So if you're like, oh, I'm not paraphrasing well, I keep getting corrected. It's not about doing it well. It's just about doing it, and then you're going to learn what the meaning is. So you don't have to try to be perfect. Just do it, and you're going to get what you want.
Yeah, like getting the reps in and just learning as you go. It's a skill, you know, and which I think kind of squashes some of the myths around communication, is that like what you mentioned at the top of the podcast with labels and us just accepting, okay, I'm a bad communicator, or I'm bad at public speaking, or I'm bad at this. Communication 100% anybody can get good at if they work on it and try to develop that skill.
For sure. Nothing is fixed. Nothing at all is fixed. Even personality traits. Personality traits are really just a set of behaviors and a set of thoughts that we kind of categorize under a trait. Like if you want to be charismatic, I mean, what is charisma? It's people doing certain things that we would deem as charismatic. So if we do those things and we learn those things, we too can be charismatic. So 100%, everything is a learnable skill. And this is really freeing for a lot of people because you're not really stuck. You can completely upgrade your speaking skills and even your personality if you so choose. So a lot of power to that.
So with communication in the business world, do you find a lot of it is about public speaking specifically, like the questions that you get asked, presenting and all that?
That's certainly part of it. However, for most people, if we look at their days, whether you're the entrepreneur with a side hustle, whether you've got your own business, whether you're transitioning, maybe you're in one or the other, very few of our time is spent actually like giving a presentation or speaking on a stage. So even though I do help with those things, I'd say a lot of the work is done in how do I speak better in these meetings? My calendar is packed with meetings. I have to have a conversation with this person, to have a team meeting with this person, with this group. I have to do this client calls, talk to this prospect. So a lot of the communication is based more on kind of those everyday situations too. Those are really the things that are going to have a tremendous impact on our lives, on our businesses. And then when there is a presentation coming up where you do have to give that talk or that speech, we absolutely work on that stuff as well. But I almost like to redefine public speaking just as anytime you're in public having to speak to people. So you're not sitting at home, but if you're in the office, you're at an event, you're even at a party, you're in public and you're speaking. So when you think about it like that, there's actually so many opportunities for you to practice some of this stuff and develop your skills.
That's very true. Thank you for that. And we do have the question that came in here in the TikTok chat about management talking to employees, like to people who I guess are lower on the totem pole, like ways to approach that, talking to employees and people who kind of work for you.
Definitely. So for them, it's going to be very important that we're very clear with them, very direct in what we need from them, while also making sure that they feel heard and appreciated. I saw this stat the other day, and it was something along the lines of way more people leave jobs because of bad managers than like anything else. That was the number one reason that people leave jobs. So think about that. You have a responsibility as a leader, as a manager, to not only be very clear and concise with your communication so that people actually understand you, but also they need to feel like you care about them. It's an important role. They need to feel like you appreciate them. So the little messages about, hey, awesome work on that. Thanks for completing this. Little gratitude statements, little emails, text chats, little verbal notes, whatever it is. But don't think that you can really over communicate with your team, because there has not been a manager in the history of time that has communicated too much and given them too much appreciation and made their team feel too valued. It's always the other way around. So really take that seriously. Spend the time sending those quick little messages. Praise them as things happen. Be specific in the types of praise that you give. Make sure that you're asking them enough questions, getting their feedback. All those little things really add up. Think about how you would want to be treated by your boss, and then see if you can kind of instill that down onto them.
Amazing. Thank you. And that was a great question too, Charles. Thank you so much, Charles, for asking that. I think as creative entrepreneurs, sometimes we're not coming from the high level, like team management side of it. But I do think, if you're outsourcing any of your editing work, or if you're expanding at all, if you're working with any kind of a team, it's important to treat them with that respect. And also, kind of an interesting thing here I learned from Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm sure you're familiar with Gary V, but he mentions that with team members, right, the CEO needs to understand that obviously the CEO is going to care more about their business than the team members. And so you got to kind of meet them where they're at and understand that this isn't their baby. This isn't their business. They're there for a paycheck. They're there because they need a job and are interested in helping you with your thing. So there's kind of this element of respect too. Like, hey, you don't have to be here. You could be anywhere in the freaking world, but you're here helping me with my vision. So thank you, and what can I do to make it a good experience?
Such a great perspective. And if you actually think of your team members that way, and also, Parker, you were bang on in that even if you have contractors, you have people working for you, as an entrepreneur, if you've got the video editor, like you said, or you got somebody helping you, like a VA helping with admin stuff, those people still count. It's still the same thing. You still need them to do stuff for you. And I've even noticed a difference because I have people that, edit my videos, VAs that help with things like that. And I even noticed a difference if I praise them more, if I'm a little bit more warmer with my communication to them, things actually get done faster. They respond better, they work faster, they're just more pleasant to deal with. So you're right, even if it's not traditional corporate leadership type of setting, all the same stuff applies to anyone that you work with. They don't really have to work with you. Yeah, you're paying them, but if you have the perspective that Parker just mentioned there, that they actually could be doing anything else, and if we treat them with that type of gratitude, then, the working relationships are just so much easier and smoother, and people will get things done faster, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm chuckling there because anyone who's listened to the last few episodes before this, they know that not too long ago, I quit my job. I left a job that I was at because of management and awful toxic situations that I was in. And, it's been nothing but open doors since then, thankfully. But how drastically different things have been at some of these other gigs that I've taken with managers that are meeting me where I'm at, and they understand that I'm building some other things on the side. And one person even, a new manager I'm working with, they're like, look, no hours, no time requirements, no nothing, work remotely, do whatever, just make sure the jobs get done, kind of a thing. And she reached out to me saying, hey, like, we've had a number of people in this role, and like, you right now with these new expectations is like, we're far better off because everything is so much faster. It's more quality. The turnaround is way quicker. So they're very impressed with how things have been too, which oddly enough, I'm actually working like less than what I would be if I was tied to the desk for 40 hours a week,
Such a great example. And how much better do you feel doing the work for them? Are you wanting to put it off and be like, well, whatever, later? Or are you like, yeah, let's go, let's do the work? It's probably such a difference in how you feel. That's such a good example.
A huge difference. Yeah. And it's how we can do this podcast right now. It's the middle of the day. Yeah, I know you're Eastern, I think, but here it's Mountain Time. So it's like 2:30 to 3:30. And I'm able to just do this, and then I can get into other stuff later. And it's not a big deal. Everything's going to be totally fine, And so it's weird when you think of other places being so strict about little things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. The sweet taste of more freedom with your time.
Absolutely. Well, hey, we're going to do a beatbox for you here in a sec to kind of close things out. But I want you to plug anything you want right now. This has been an amazing interview. And I want everyone who's listening on TikTok right now to listen up. And then everyone who's listening to this podcast, which goes out everywhere. I want you guys to listen up. I want you to check the show notes and check out the links that I'm going to put there. But Ty, what can they find from you? Where can they find you? And where do you want to send them?
For sure, Parker, this has been great. So I came prepared. I actually want to give something very special to your audience, really just to say thanks. Thanks for listening to our episode. So this is something I typically only give to paying clients, but if you're listening, you stayed till the end of the show, I want to give it to you for free. So this is what I call the CEO communication kit. So there's two parts to this. The first part, the course called Speak Like a Confident Leader in 7 days. This course, it's really for the person who knows they have so much more potential in them, and they know that deep down they want to be a stronger, more confident leader. But sometimes when they open their mouth, they feel like maybe they're not good enough, or they don't feel as confident as they'd like. And they're just not communicating in a way that really gets them the results that they want to be having. So this course, it shows you in 7 days how to speak with that confidence, charisma, and clarity, just like the top level leaders, even when you're put on the spot. So you can get more income, you can get the opportunities you deserve. So that's the first part of the course, the first part of the kit. And the second part of the CEO communication kit. And this part in particular, Parker, you actually inspire me by over-delivering on value. You've done 250 episodes. The way you show up for your community is super impressive. So you've inspired me to over-deliver with the second part. The second part of the CEO communication kit, this is what I call the secrets to CEO level presence. So this is something that if you're listening, I'll teach you for free on a live one-on-one coaching call. Just really as my way of saying thank you for listening. So if you want to, number one, work on your CEO level speaking, and number two, develop your CEO level presence, I'll personally work with you for 60 minutes so that you can command respect before opening your mouth. And then when you do open your mouth, you make the best of it, you speak at your best, and make the most of the opportunity. So if you want this, again, it's for free, just my way of saying thanks. You can go to my Instagram or LinkedIn. And just so that I know that you came from Parker's podcast, message me the word CEO24. Okay. And my Instagram and LinkedIn, they're both Ty Hoesgen, which is TyHoesgen. And the last name's a little bit tricky, so I'll say it again quick. TyHoesgen. And just message me the word CEO24 so I know you came from the podcast. We'll book the call, get everything set up. So that's CEO24. That's to get the CEO communication kit at Ty Hoesgen, LinkedIn, or Instagram.
Amazing. And thanks for the kind words and also for offering that up to the listeners, because it will be hugely valuable to them. And I hope everyone takes you up on that. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast, Ty, and I'm going to do a quick beatbox with your name in it.
I've been waiting for this.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Ty. Take the time to with Ty Hoesgen.
Oh, well worth the wait. Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you so much.